Hey everyone, Rho here. Today, oh yes today, we are kicking off our week dedicated to Leman Russ, the greatest of all the Primarchs. Oh yes, I said it. While there's a lot of interesting stuff I want to discuss this week, where better to begin than the birth of the rivalry with Lionel Johnson. General spoiler warning to begin, as we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned, as well as events specifically covered in the Leman Russ Primarch novel The Great Wolf by Chris Wraight. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, because that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Rivalries amongst the Primarchs is certainly not unheard of. In fact, it's really just part of who they are. As siblings and brothers, they vied for their father's attention. As warlords and generals, they pitted their reputations. And as mere men, they pitted their strength against each other. In such a combination, rivalries were bound to happen, and indeed not only expected, but encouraged by their father. The competition between the brothers would only further advance the Great Crusade, and thus the glory of the fledgling Imperium. Now, undoubtedly one of the most infamous rivalries, or perhaps grudges may be a better term, was that of Leman Russ and Lionel Johnson. Their duel upon the world of Doolan is infamous throughout all of the lore, something that is still honoured 10,000 years later between their descended chapters. However, the truth is this conflict didn't simply erupt out of nowhere, and the seeds of discontent that began this path were sown in the days beforehand. And that is where the birth of their rivalry truly began. Now, during the Great Crusade, the Space Wolves Legion were called in to assist the Imperial Army in the Doolan campaign. The Imperial Army had actually suffered several defeats, forcing the powers of Terror to redirect a legion to take over control. However, the enemy continued to put up a fierce and strong resistance. While the arrival of Russ's legion certainly turned things back in the right direction, the fighting was hard. And it wasn't long before the new cast of politicians upon the throne world began calling for Russ's legion to be removed. And these events are all covered in Russ's Primarch novel, The Great Wolf by Chris Wraight. And I know I'm biased, but it's definitely one of the best Primarch novels going for my mind. So I really do recommend you check it out for yourself first. Chris Wraight in particular really has a great way of capturing the essence of Russ, the character behind the stereotype of savage. Now here Russ travels to meet up with a portion of his legion, who have been stalled by the enemy forces, and he doesn't berate them and fly off into a rage as the tales of his legend may have you expect. He instead simply asks them how the fighting's been going, and when they honestly tell him, well, pretty hard, he believes them, and he lets them know that he believes them. You see the truth of the commander that Leman Russ is, the man deserving respect. As it turns out, Russ is very aware he has few supporters upon Terra, outside that of his father and Malcador. His unconventional manner does little but invoke fear in those decision makers now walking the Imperial Palace, and so any delays are simply seen as the wolves being caught up in simple bloodlust, and thus the newly forming human powers within the palace have been calling to replace Leman and his legion with one of his more conventional brothers, and that of course was the Dark Angels and Lion L. Johnson. And as it turns out, he's already been on the campaign somewhere for several months without even making contact with Russ. Now we actually get a glimpse of Russ's early opinion on the Lion. Firstly, he calls him his younger brother, reinforcing the feeling that I've always had, as Russ viewing himself in the older brother role within the Primarchs. As we know, Russ was the second found after Horus, and so not only does it further show why Horus was the only brother Russ truly looked up to, it also shows Russ clearly doesn't put much stock in the Lion's title of the first. Aside from that, he mentions he's barely ever spoken to him, but he does say that he's a good tactician, cold-blooded and arrogant, making a remark about him fitting in on Terra. So while Russ clearly doesn't have much personal affection for the Lion, despite their lack of time together, he clearly does respect his military prowess. And events move on in the campaign, with eventually Russ finding the location and path to the enemy's homeworld. And when his forces arrive, they're immediately met with a space battle going on before them. The Dark Angels were already there. As frustrated as Russ was to have been beaten to the homeworld, he ordered his fleet to move in and back up any Dark Angels forces engaged. Now through the course of this battle, it becomes apparent as the wolves move in that the Dark Angels' largest vessels were hanging back, appearing hesitant to commit to the battle. Instead, they remained firing from long range, sending in their smaller classes amongst the enemy. And to the wolves, this seems like nothing short of throwing away valuable resources and lives, and they assume it must be the Dark Angels' cold way of war. And so this is where things get particularly interesting, as one of the Space Wolf captains moves in for the kill on one of the largest enemy vessels. As he does so, he receives a hail from the Dark Angels, which he tells his men to leave until after they've finished with the enemy ship, continuing to unleash his main weapons. Again, another urgent hail comes in, and again the Space Wolf captain ignores it, now too immersed with the ongoing noise of battle. A few moments later, they destroy the enemy as the ship begins to break apart. The Space Wolf crew pulls away from the explosion, rejoicing their excitement in true Space Wolf style. However, then they are fired upon, this time by one of the Dark Angels' capital ships, and they aren't stopping, and the rest of the Dark Angels' fleet is now moving in. Russ, immediately witnessing this from his ship, orders it into the breach between them, demanding to get his brother on the communications, only barely managing to save his men from destruction by taking a shot onto his own vessel. And now here, in this impromptu standoff between loyal Legion fleets, with the original battle against the enemy still raging, the Lion and Russ finally speak over the communications. Russ is of course at a complete loss as to what's going on, demanding to know what madness the Dark Angels are doing, firing upon a fellow Legion. And the Lion responds by telling Russ to simply leash his dogs, and that his men were holding back for a reason. As it turns out, The Dark Angel's capital ships were not holding back simply to sacrifice the smaller ones, but because they had men boarded on the enemy vessel. 10 full squads of Dark Angels were fighting their way to the enemy bridge as the Space Wolves captain destroyed it. And this news hit Russ like a ton of bricks, and he's simply stunned into silence, even though it was one of his captains who caused the events and not him. Ignoring the Dark Angel's hails, Russ of course feels responsible, and you can understand that. I think anyone who's been in some form of leadership can, or at least I do. When someone on your team makes a mistake, you as the leader, or manager or whatever role you may have been in, are the one where the responsibility lies. And you feel every inch of that responsibility. Obviously, this kind of situation where lives and deaths are at stake, the responsibility of that is unimaginable. For all the stereotypes of Leman Russ, for all the myths surrounding his character, you'd expect him to rage and order his men to fire back against the Dark Angels. And many of his fleet's captains are calling for them to do just that. However, Russ doesn't. He knows how grave this situation is. He knows how quickly this could all unravel into something even worse. And he knows truthfully that the fault lies with him. And so, in a moment that could have so easily unravelled into a full-scale Legion war, Leman Russ swallows down his pride, and he orders his fleet to stand down, conceding to his brother that he has been wronged, and asking him to call off his attack, and that after the battle, he will come before him to apologise. And for me, this is one of my favourite Leman Russ moments, because it shows the measure of the man. Leman Russ has come so far from that original stereotype. Yes, he wields it as a mask, in situations where he needs to, but more and more we have seen the intelligence, the strength, the compassion that exists on the man within. There's an old saying that it takes a real man to accept that he's wrong, and you can probably magnify that tenfold when it comes to a Primarch before his brother. Never in a million years would you expect one to accept responsibility to another, let alone apologise. And yet here, Russ swallows his pride and does exactly that. He proves why he is the king of Fenris, the son of the Emperor, and even that older brother. He accepts the responsibility. And after the battle has ended, Russ does exactly what he said he would do, and he travels over to the Invincible Reason. There's a great little scene of Russ's men trying to talk him out of going, claiming it's a dishonour and a weakness. And there you get another real glimpse and the truth of Russ, how he uses this moment as a teaching moment to his sons, showing them the truth of what it means to be a real leader. Sometimes you just have to swallow your pride and acknowledge a mistake. And that's exactly what Leman Russ is doing. As it is once aboard, the Lion of course has all his men lined up in parade fashion. Some might say to honour a brother's arrival, others to add insult to injury, to make the moment all the harder for his brother. I guess how you feel is up to you. I think I know the way I'm leaning on that one, and it's most certainly to make the moment harder. Face to face together, there's little warmth in the brothers' greeting. The Lion concedes he didn't think Russ would come, and there's a bit of banter between the two regarding the campaign, with the Lion revealing he found Doolan thanks to the extra knowledge the Dark Angels possess. Another hint to the benefits of being the first. And in another good piece of insight, this time into the Lion's nature, Russ asks him why he didn't share it, and the Lion can only say that he'd have thought about it if asked. And of course that question would never have come, because Russ would never have known. He didn't even know the Lion and his legion were on the campaign until it was too late. To me, this is just another real testament to the Lion's lack of ability to foster any real connection with his brothers. Something that could so easily have been shared, instead was kept as a secret. Ultimately, however, the topic turns back to the reason for Russ's arrival, and despite his pride yelling at him to draw his weapon, Russ makes his apology, bowing his head before his brother and requesting his pardon. It's the kind of scene you would never have expected to see, especially from one such as Russ. However, again, this is what makes him such an amazingly deep character. There's simply so much more than that barbarian warrior stereotype. A highlight of why he has such trust from his father. Because he will always do the right thing. For all the act, for all the bravado, Russ never truly wants to cross his brothers. Sure, he'll fight them, but he never in truth wants to kill them. Something that would perhaps become his undoing so much later with his brother Horus. At the end of the day, Leman simply couldn't bring himself to end his brother. Once the Lion declares the apology accepted, and even embraces his brother, as far as the Lion can anyway, there's an absolutely killer line from Russ, whispering in his ear that if he ever fires on his sons again, calling the Lion boy, he'll rip out his throat and eat it. And the Lion's taken aback here, and he can't quite make out if this is a threat or a joke. A lot of the times with Russ, it's hard enough to tell at the best of times, even for more adjusted people, shall we say, than L. Johnson. However, Russ laughs it off in his usual manner. And again, even this gives us a great insight into the nature of Russ, referencing his use of boy, reaffirming that notion that he feels himself to be the elder brother, that he doesn't view the first as a level over him being the earlier found. And maybe that also could give us a reflection in his apology, that maybe Russ wasn't just doing this as a learning tool for his sons, but maybe also for his younger brother as well, showing his stuck-up, aloof brother of the first that there is more to the Wolf King, that there is more to being a commander than meets the eye, and that he too has an honor in which he lives his life. For all their differences, physical and invisible, perhaps there's more in common between the Lion and the Wolf than maybe we've ever truly realized. They both live by a code of honor, just from two very different worlds. Regardless of that, however, there can be no doubt that the seeds of the duel upon Doolan were founded in the events beforehand. And this code of honor, this apology to a brother, rather than fixing the situation between them, maybe was just the founding for it to get a whole lot worse. But as always guys, what do you think? For me, the Dark Angels for their part certainly weren't in the wrong. They hailed the Space Wolf vessel several times to try and get them to stop, and so they can hardly be blamed for being angered at the loss of their own men. However, Russ too certainly wasn't at fault for me here, and in fact maybe comes out as the larger man, willing to accept his responsibility, even willing to swallow his pride, even apologizing when his brother certainly wasn't making it easy for him. Again, it's these kind of moments that really reflect the best of Leman Russ for me, showing us the truth of the man beneath. The man rarely glimpsed, but the one that always is there. Maybe these kind of moments let you look at other events involving Russ, such as his altercation with Angron, in a whole different light. If Russ was trying to show the Lion a lesson here, then perhaps it's even clearer he was doing the same more so with Angron then. But as always guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again tomorrow.